Today is October 13th, 2020, and when I was in 7th grade, I had a partner who in my class, and we had to share information, sort of like give an interview to each other, and today was her birthday. Like, I remember that from 7th grade, and for whatever reason, I remembered that. Again, my brain is like Swiss cheese. Hard set in some spots, straight through in the other ones. Like nothing holding any information back. It's all crazy. So now, here we are 27 years later, and I still remember that, and I still wish her a happy birthday. So she's awesome, she's married, she's great, got kids, awesome stuff. All that to say, today we're gonna be looking at, I'm gonna be introducing one extra part from yesterday. So yesterday we went over 5 things, well, one thing in 5 parts. One thing was literary devices. The 5 parts were rhyming, whether it be end rhyme or internal rhyme, repetition, alliteration, onomatopoeia, and the last one was personification. Those are the 5 literary devices that authors use. Those are 5 literary, I think there's many of them. And what was I going to say there? Oh, those are just 5 of the many literary devices. So we're going to use those. And if you read yesterday like you were supposed to, you read first, you read the poem, and then you listened to the audio recording of the poem like you were supposed to, you may have seen those 5 pieces. Now, today you're going to be asked a question in the Google Classroom. We have an assignment, and in it, there's a question concerning the word stanza. So I'm going to ask a question in the chat, and I'm going to have you answer it. Go ahead and write in the chat. I asked the question, what is a stanza? George K? George K. What is George K? George Costanza. Bad joke. All right. Aleo says stanza is the line in a poem, and you're very close. Imagine, if you will, a collection of lines with a consistent thought usually. A collection of lines, and you can have as many as you choose, I suppose. You could have 3, 6, 10, 15. That would be a stanza, and then you'd have a break, and then you'd have another section, which would also be a stanza. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and you are going to see in real time what a that's not what I want to do. What a stanza is. So here we go. The ability to share there it is. Share screen. All right, so I'm sharing my screen, and you are seeing this room in this particular poem. The stanza, there are 4 stanzas, and they're identified with a Roman numeral. 1, Roman numeral 2, Roman numeral 3, Roman numeral 4. Not all poems have that, but this particular one does. So it sets apart the stanza with those Roman numerals. So what we want to do is I'll read through this first one just to give us an idea. This way we can look back and look at some of those literary devices. So here we go. Oh, there might be a chat. Nope, there we go. Hear the sledges with the bells, silver bells. What a world of merriment their melody foretells. How they tinkle, tinkle, tinkle in the icy air of night. While the stars that oversprinkle all the heavens seem to twinkle with the crystalline delight, keeping time, time, time in a sort of runic rhyme to the tintinnabulation that so musically wells from the bells, 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 from the jingling and the tinkling of the bells. Now, I'm going to stop right there because we're going to look and see that I just read the first stanza. That's all I read. As you see, there's a Roman numeral 2, and there's a second stanza, Roman numeral 3, and then a Roman numeral 4, completing the 4th stanza. That is the total of the poem. But as we see, we can see at least 3 literary devices within this one stanza. Can somebody in the chat tell me what is one literary device that you can spot within this first stanza? What is one literary device that you can spot in this? Does anybody see one of the literary pieces that we went over yesterday? And okay, so AB, you said repetition. JC says repetition. And that's absolutely correct. And I'm going to highlight that repetition part. So you can see here, both answers are correct. Repetition. Bells, bells, bells. He says it 7 times. Bells, 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 bells. Okay? But there's also another literary device that was used. And does anybody know it? Aside from repetition. So we have repetition, that's one. What is another literary device that was used? Great job. Rhyme is absolutely correct. Oh, time was. Good job. FY, good job. Time was repeated many times too. Somebody mentioned Eminem, and JC mentioned rhyme. So here we go. Bells, foretells. Night, delight. Time, rhyme. Wells, bells. Yes, I am, AB. Yes, I am. I'm recording on this one. So that's 2. So you could have repetition and you can have rhyme. And in this case, it's end rhyme. And the other one I would add in there is onomatopoeia, because I think things like tinkling and twinkle, and I actually conferred with the online sources, and they agreed that this was part of onomatopoeia. So I was like, wow, I thought that. I went in and checked. I was willing to be wrong, but I was confirmed with my belief. So that was pretty cool. Tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. Oh my gosh, first period just struck. You said you were laughing, and now I know why you're laughing. I cannot believe it took this long. Oh man, hang in there. I'll be okay. Woo. So those are 3 of the 5 literary devices that we looked at yesterday, just in the first stanza. So once you start to spot these, you become a better reader when you're able to spot these, which is important because we want you to become a better reader, which is why we give you those literary devices, because if you can see them, that's important. You'll become a better reader for that. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the assignment that you have in Google Classroom. The assignment that you have in Google Classroom, there are 13 questions, and here it is. And the directions are simple. With the help of the Chamber Theater website, which is what we accessed the reading and the text from, you have read the bells and you listen to the audio interpretation of the famed poem. Having completed both tasks, because that's what you were supposed to do, you are to answer the questions below. As always, you may revisit both resources if they're available still. If not, I made them available in other ways via the Chamber website. Best of luck with all the rhyming and chiming bells. Here we go. Now, point number 1, you have to be logged into your LH Schools account. Okay? You can't be using your secret Gmail account or your Outlook account. You can't be using that. You have to use your LHschools.org account. So, with that in mind, the first 3 are the same: first name, second, last name, and then class period. This is just your typical drop-down menu, so go ahead and select. I'm sure it is a required question. Here goes the questions. And if you'll notice, there are different types of questions. There's comprehension questions. There's also vocabulary questions. And this is inside your Google Classroom right now. As the poem progresses, what kind of moods does Poe provide for us? Once again, I'm going to say this one more time. In 8th grade, it is very rare that we would ask us questions such as, what is it that is ringing? You don't even have to read the poem, to just be able to look on one of the lines and say, oh, it's the bells that are ringing. That's not hard. If you'll notice, this question is asking from the first line to the last line. You have to sort of make sense of it all to be able to answer this question. Once again, welcome to 8th grade. This is the life we lead. Sorry. Question number 2, identify which of the following is an example of alliteration. And we talked about that yesterday. In session 14, we talked about what is alliteration. So you should be able to answer that here. I'm not going to let you see any answers now. In the first stanza, the bells are symbolic of what event? You would have to have read that entire first stanza in order to be able to answer this question. You will never be able to go into one line, make a determination of what that first one represents. And in fact, you might have to read the second, third, and fourth to be able to really tell what that first stanza is all about. Very complex stuff, but you can do it. I used the following excerpt from stanza 2, this excerpt right here, and it's an example of what form of figurative language. Now remember, a metaphor is comparing two things without using like or as. We went over personification and onomatopoeia. The next one is hyperbole. When you say I'm starving to death, my daughter says this quite frequently, Dad, I'm starving to death. That's hyperbole because it's over-exaggeration. My typical response to her is, you can go 40 days without food. I know you ate yesterday, so you have 39 days left. You're not starving to death. Okay, you might be really hungry, which is fine, but hyperbole is when you say something over-exaggeration. And that's what hyperbole is. So our answer is within this. The following excerpt is from stanza 3, how the danger ebbs and flows. And again, they're asking the question, this excerpt helps the reader to understand that stanza 3 was written about which life event. So you would have to understand what stanza 3 is all about in order to understand what that line represents. Again, you cannot just answer one question on one line. Next up is vocabulary, the word merriment. Following that one is a question about Poe and which stanza, identify the stanza that Poe would most likely identify with based off his own life experiences. At this point, you would have to reflect back to, and if you needed to, go back to the Poe biography that we read. And we answered some questions on the Poe biography, who he was. We remember that he was a pretty avid sports star in school. He went on to the military. He got out of the military. He got a job. He married his 12-year-old, 13-year-old first cousin. We knew a lot about Edgar Allan Poe, and this is an important question to draw upon, that information. Next up is vocabulary, the word euphony. Next up is select which of the following statements is true about the overall poem, The Bells. Once again, you'll have to know the entire poem in order to answer this. Number 10, is a vocabulary question for the word clamor. Next up is reflecting on the audio file concerning the poem that you listen to. That's why this is important. So number 11, you would have had to have listened to that file. Number 12 is again vocabulary concerning the word melancholy. And identify the main idea of the idea of Poe's The Bells. So real quick point of note concerning, I think all of these questions. You sort of have to have read the entire thing and probably listened to the entire thing in order to get a good sense. If you have to read it a second and third time, do it. So that's the idea of comprehension, understanding the entire thing, as well as I picked the certain vocabulary words in order to help you understand what those words mean, yes, but also how they fit into the overall stanza and the overall poem. So that's a bit of a hint, but not much of a hint unless you're tracking on that. So that is the assignment that is in your Google Classroom. And before you leave,